I've always struggled with journaling. Everywhere I look online, there are hundreds of people telling me all the benefits of doing it, but it's just never stuck with me. There's a lot of people giving specific ideas and prompts and methods as well, but just none of them seem to work for me in the long run. So I did a bit of digging, and this channel, Mr. Clark's Classroom, is all about exploring your heights and depths and encouraging self-discovery and change and focusing on the deeper underlying principles of ideas rather than just the shallow tips and tricks. And then something stupidly obvious occurred to me. I've not been treating journaling as a deep practice, and that's exactly why it's never stuck with me. I'd reduced journaling down to its methods and completely ignoring the principles of 1, how to journal, 2, what to journal about, and 3, why I should be journaling to begin with. So what I did was I zoomed out and looked at all the various methods, see what they had in common, and then I zoomed back in to see what I could do about it. And that led to this idea and this video. And I think I might have just come up with the single most comprehensive, practical, and probably controversial journaling video on YouTube. So let's explore Mr. Clark's semi-coherent journaling extravaganza, or whatever we can call this. This will become increasingly faster paced, by the way, so just pause the video as and when you need to. All right. The idea is extremely simple because there are essentially only 2 recurring foundations that all the methods that I researched relied on. And these were questions around content and questions around structure. So in other words, all the issues, all the agreements, all the disagreements about journaling boil down to 1, what to write about, so content, and 2, how to write about it, which is structure. Some of these, if I just move this to the top to make it nice and clear, some of these were extremely traditional in their approach. There are already templates and methods and agreed ways to write about and also what to write about, which have proven themselves as reliable frameworks over time. So I'm going to call fans of this approach the purists. And at the opposite end, you've got the rule breakers. These are the experimenters, for better or worse, the method of writing, the use of language, the purpose, what it is being written on, if anything, are all factors to play with. And so for that reason, I'm going to call those fans of that approach the rebels. And if we've got purists on one side, who love the tradition and the order of things, and then we've got rebels who embrace the experimentation and the creativity, then I'm going to just say the middle ground belongs to the neutrals. So these are the journalers who take a bit more of a blended approach and are a bit more open to new ideas, as well as relying on old and reliable and traditional methods. And this gives us all the factors that we need. The debate isn't just about the purists and the rebels, it's much more nuanced than that. So, for example, you might be a purist in terms of content, but you might be a rebel in terms of structure. So, for example, just to make that really, really clear, you might like to process your emotions by handwriting your thoughts as a diary entry, so that'd be content purist, but you don't like using a traditional notebook, so you just use loose napkins, or you write poems, or you draw pictures just to process those emotions instead. So that would make you a structure rebel. So equally, you might end up being a neutral when it comes to structure, so if we move that over here, but a rebel when it comes to content instead. So you don't mind what the structure looks like, but you want to be experimental in terms of what you journal about. And with that in mind, we end up with 9 types of potential journalers, if we make all this really clear by putting out these labels, because these are all the options that we get. So you can probably see where I'm going with this, can't you? I'm a very obsessive and very pedantic man, so let's go into some blatantly unnecessary detail on this already probably ridiculous idea. And it'll probably help as well to describe what these labels actually refer to in the first place in a very, very broad, stereotypical way, before we actually start to look at some of the practical ways. So let's have a look at these 9 types overall. So first, if we look at the idea of the structure purist. So we'll start with this column over here. These are the people that might prefer the pen and paper approach. It's very analog, it's very scheduled, it's very consistent. So for example, you might always be using the same notebook. This would be usually handwritten, usually date stamped, and the notebook will have a single purpose as a place to journal. And then we come to the structure neutrals. So this might be a mix of digital as well as physical methods, as they're a bit more loose than the purists. So the timings might be flexible in that the journaling doesn't have to be done as a strict daily or weekly consistent practice. Neutrals are just going to use this whenever it feels appropriate. There's no specific medium and there's still some structure, but there's no firm boundaries about the format or the tools that are being used. And that means that we come to our first set of rebels, which is the structure rebel. So the structure here is made to be experimented with. So voice notes count, as does handwriting on loose napkins or scrapbooks or just random loose pieces of paper. A structure rebel might write something on a leaf and then just throw it in a river because there's no reason to keep what you've just written. Likewise, you might be thinking social media could be used, like a daily vlog uploaded to Instagram stories. This is all about creativity and bending or stretching the rules around the structure of journaling. And if at this point you're thinking, that's not even journaling anymore, then congratulations, you're a purist or a neutral. And if you're thinking, oh, I didn't even realize that you could consider this journaling, or I quite like this is what I already do, then congratulations, you're a structure rebel. All right. Let's crack on with the next axis, the content axis. Again, you can probably see where I'm going with all this, but I'm going to make it all really clear anyway. So first, we have got the content purist. This is likely your everyday understanding of journaling when you're asked to picture what you would write about. So these are extremely traditional topics like daily reflections, gratitude practices, maybe a daily review of events, like what are the highs, what are the lows, anything to do with emotional processing or processing a specific event that might have happened. That would be a content purist. But then we come to the content neutrals. So as before, it's a bit of a blend of the traditional and the experimental. So it'll include things like writing maybe from pre-given prompts. It might be exploring insights that you've had. It might be writing down loose fragments of ideas rather than complete thoughts, and playing with the tenses. So maybe like the past, the present, or the future tense thoughts. It's easier to think of topics for this section when we might start to consider the clear difference between the purists and the rebels. So with that in mind, the content rebels. This is going to be way more abstract and non-linear in the sense that one thought doesn't have to logically follow from another like it would do with the purists. Spelling and grammar might be completely irrelevant, and the content could be more poetic. It might be focusing on moods rather than logical sentences, or they might be really visual in the sense that there's no paragraphs or like paragraph writing. It might just be diagrams or graphs or flowcharts, or it might just be outright chaotic in the sense that there's no particular purpose at all. So you might intuitively have a bit of an idea about where you stand on a grid like this based on these descriptions. You might have very strong feelings about this and completely disagree with everything I've said so far. In which case, it's very good to meet you, Mr. Content and Structure Purist. You are welcome here. So with this in mind, if you've made it this far into this video on such a ridiculous idea, then we might as well make this practical anyway. And obviously, I've been pedantic enough to actually type this up into a color-coded grid. So I'm absolutely going to fly through this. Just pause the video on whatever segment feels right for you if you want some ideas. And as a side note, this could be great to start some arguments over the next family dinner or when you meet up with some friends. So go wild if that's how you decide to use something like this. Obviously, it's not exhaustive, it's just some ideas that I've come up with, given that I've been obsessively hyper-focusing on this for a few weeks. All right, deep breath, Billy, here we go. We're going to start with the content purist the structure purist and the content purist. This is going to be gratitude journaling, daily reflections, usually with time-stamped entries, structured morning pages, a CBT thought diary to record your ongoing thoughts, tracking daily highs and lows, processing specific emotional events within a framework, and also prayer if it's written down. Structure neutral and content purist. This is going to be, again, gratitude journaling, but a bit more flexible. Could be daily voice notes, writing to yourself on WhatsApp, writing daily emails to yourself, using an existing list of prompts. And again, prayer would be relevant here if it was going to be spoken out loud. Structure rebel and content purist. uploading Instagram stories daily as a vlog, deep conversations with friends, capturing moments as photographs, conversations with yourself out loud, voice notes wherever you feel the urge to record one, sticky notes, or using any other temporary medium like loose bits of paper, napkins, and leaves, like I was saying before, or just talking to yourself in a mirror. That's going to count as well. Right, the content neutral row. Structure purist and content neutral. Any journaling that uses prompts. These could be handwritten entries, they might be loose ideas, they might be a bit more complete. Writing letters to yourself, it could be your past self, it could be your future self. Anything that is going to be a blended approach. So it could be part gratitude, part reflection, part daily review. Then we've got the true neutrals in the middle of all this. So the structure neutral and the content neutral. It was actually quite hard to come up with ideas for complete neutrals because there's a lot of crossover here with basically every other point. So maybe if you're a true neutral, if you could help me out in the comments. I struggled with this one. So a mixture of digital and analog prompts and methods, writing down weekly insights, using mixed media. If you're into parts work, using conversations with parts, or maybe writing 200 or 300 word mini essays. All right, structure rebel, content neutral. Collaging thoughts, emotions, and ideas, using voice memos, using photography to explore moods, stream of consciousness style documents, just writing down any loose thoughts in the notes app on your phone, sketches or drawings with captions, discussion groups, or using a whiteboard or anything else temporary. And then finally, we come to the content rebel row. So, with this in mind, structure purist and content rebel. Using visual representations to process reflections or gratitude. So things like mind maps and flowcharts and graphs and diagrams. It could be writing poetry, writing about your dreams, especially lucid dreaming. Speaking to archetypes or to the divine. This is where Jungian active imagination would come in, if you are aware of what that means. Drawing symbols or things that have got a bit more of a symbolic representation would be useful as well. Structure neutral and content rebel. This is going to be dream logs. That would be relevant again here. Same with anything to do with drawing or painting or sketching. And to take dream logs further, maybe dialoguing with some of those dream characters. A bit like that active imagination idea I was just saying. Mixed media approaches to lots of other points that we've already covered. Writing from the perspective of your future self. And also commonplace books. I've seen them being quite popular recently on YouTube as well. Right. And now we've got the structure rebel and the content rebel. This is an absolute free-for-all, I'm not going to lie. So anything goes here. Rather than just going into full chaos, I'll at least try to give you some practical ideas. So collecting photos and writing poems about those photos, singing to yourself on a voice note, not even using words on a voice note, just making noises that seem appropriate to whatever you're trying to do. Writing on things that you are intentionally going to burn or throw away or bury. It could be drawing out inner world maps. It could be collaging to tell stories but in a more symbolic way. It could be dancing or a bit more of a movement therapy. Anything which is physically expressive. It could be gestalt practices like an empty chair exercise. Again, it is quite similar to that active imagination idea. And also Zen Buddhist meditation. I would consider that to go in there as well. All right then, that is, I think, a controversial enough list for everyone to start arguing about where this line on journaling actually begins and ends. But that's the whole point for this. Don't take it too seriously. I love reading and debating ideas and exploring thoughts, but at some point, these boundaries start to dissolve. The definitions become too limiting and we start to get bogged down in the unnecessary details, arguing about the superficial methods instead of uniting on what we've actually got in common, which is the urge to explore the unknown, who we could be and how we came to be this way in the first place, and how we're actually experiencing the present moment. It's ultimately just playing around with some factors around content and around structure. What are you doing and how are you doing it? That's ultimately it. So rather than focusing on trying to convince others that they're doing it wrong or that your way is somehow better, instead just focus on your practice and improving your practice. Or don't have a practice altogether. In which case, how very zen of you, you little content and structure rebel. All right, that's my little journalorium, explanatorium, or whatever I said at the beginning of this video. And that's it. So I will see you in a future lesson. See you soon.